to brain waves. We are getting there, guys. All right. Fun stuff, brain waves. We are just going to, like, surface level cover this stuff, guys. There's so much more about brain waves that if you are interested in it, you can do some research and figure it out, okay? So, normal brain function involves continuous electrical activity, right? That goes back to how a neuron functions. We're moving ions in and out, which causes electrical impulses, okay? A separation of charges. So we can use an EEG, or electroencephalogram, to measure these changes in electrical activity across the brain. So what we'll do is we'll take a person, we'll cover them with electrodes, and what you're measuring is the difference in charge between the two pairs of electrodes. So you get a lot of information when you do this type of EEG. Okay? We are looking for overall brain activity with this. We are not measuring the brain activity of a single neuron. Okay? We haven't gone into the brain and picked out one single neuron to measure. Okay, we're looking at an average. Okay, so we can measure that as brain waves. We'll get a beautiful little chart that we'll look at in a second. And each person has a unique brainwave pattern. So we're going to look at some overall general ideas, but if we hooked all of you guys up to EEGs, you would all look a little bit different. So, yeah, they're pretty fun. Do you guys do EEGs in the anatomy lab? No. Okay. So when you do EEGs, you'll get all these beautiful waves, and then you have to analyze the waves and see what's actually going on. Okay, so there are 4 basic wave patterns, and we're just going to look at a general, what do they mean? Okay, and this was part of your quiz. So alpha waves are low amplitude. You are awake, but relaxed. So it's an idling brain. Hopefully, you guys don't have too many alpha waves going on right now. You may, but hopefully not too many. But it's just kind of, sitting there, you're relaxed, you're just chilling. Okay. Beta waves, you can see they're more irregular. They're not lined up all together like the alpha waves were. And they occur when you are awake, but you are using your brain to do something. Okay, so you're doing something mentally challenging, or you're taking in a lot of information. So an easy way to change between alpha and beta waves is to open and close your eyes. So if you open your eyes, you have more of the beta waves because you're taking in sensory information, visual information, and then when you close your eyes, you usually shift back into the alpha waves. So the military actually researched for a while in what's it called? Communication methods using alpha and beta brainwaves, where they would have somebody in one place with an EEG on and have them open and close their eyes, doing Morse code and sending the information to somebody else. Interesting. Okay. Then your last 2 are theta waves and delta waves. Theta waves are more irregular than alpha. They're common in children, but not very common in adults. So what I was reading about these theta waves is guys, you can go down lots of rabbit trails if you Google theta waves, because they are like, if you're going to do meditation, they really want you to get into this theta wave. It's crazy, okay? But they said theta waves are more of what you're going to get when you're daydreaming, okay? So you're just kind of floating out into your own little space, and you get some theta waves, okay? So not super common, but can happen in an adult. Okay, and then delta waves, high amplitude waves seen while you're in very deep sleep. Yes?
Can you explain like the difference between frequency and amplitude?
Yes. Okay, so on our graph, across the bottom is time, and then this one is going to be the amperage or the impulse, how much electrical activity is there. Okay, so the frequency is going to be, I'll go to that part, but frequency is how often it's going to happen in a second. So how many waves are compressed into that area. So comparing this to this, So we got a wave, a wave, a wave. And here we got wave, 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 wave. This one has a higher frequency. Okay, it's happening faster. These have a lower frequency. Okay, because they're going by that path slower. They're slower waves. Then amplitude is how high the wave is, how big it is, how much energy it actually has. Okay, so these waves have a high amplitude. They're bigger, but slower. Okay, and then these are littler, a smaller amplitude, a higher frequency. They happen faster. Yeah.
So, the crazy that I can't see, which one are you?
Let's see. So it's theta waves are common in children. So it would have been that it's fine to see theta waves. Yeah. You can still see theta waves in sleep time. All right. So 4 basic brainwave types. Now, what can those brainwaves tell you? So if you do a map of the brain using all your little electrodes and looking at the difference between all of them, we can use it to diagnose and locate brain lesions, so injuries to the brain, tumors, infarctions, or infarcts. That's just going to be an area of the brain that's died. It hasn't received the blood supply it needs. Infections, abscesses, and epileptic lesions as well. Okay, so what they'll look at, you'll have your EEG graph here. This one marking, or tracing, is going to be the electrical activity between any 2 of these electrodes. So maybe this number 1 is right there, between those 2. Okay, and then number 2 tracing, maybe between those 2 guys. Okay, and so you're looking at the tracings of the combinations of all these different electrodes, and you can look and see where is there damage or where is it different than all the other tracings. And that will say, oh, something is happening between those 2 electrodes. We can narrow it down and say that is the place where there was injury in the brain. Okay, so if there's something happening between these 2, something happening between these 2, and let's say this third one is between these 2, where's the injury probably going to be? Right there somewhere, right? Also, a flat EEG means that there is no brain activity, okay? Which is one of the definitions of death. There's the brain death, okay? So that can be measured with an EEG, all right? Brain waves also change with age. So you saw the theta waves change between children and adults. If we're talking about like daydreaming and lack of focus, it kind of makes sense that that happens more in children than adults, right? Sensory stimuli can opening and close your eyes, can switch between alpha and beta. Brain disease and the chemical state of the body. So pH changes can change your EEG waves. Certain drugs can change your EEG waves. Okay? All right. Types of sleep. There are 2 basic types of sleep. Some of you guys are experiencing one of these right now, I feel like. Okay, but the 2 types are non-rapid eye movement and rapid eye movement sleep. They're so creative. Which one of those 2 is where you dream? Rapid eye movement. Rapid eye movement. Okay. Then in non-rapid eye movement, there are usually 4 stages, and you go from one stage to the other as you're drifting into sleep. Okay, and then you come back out. So stage 1 of non-rapid eye movement, 2, 3, 4, but then it will go back up 3, 2, 1, and then you'll get back to REM. And then you go through those cycles as you sleep, into REM and out of REM. Okay? So you have alternating cycles of sleep and wakefulness. It's going going to reflect a natural circadian rhythm. So let's think back to our brain regions. Do you remember which region of the brain was responsible for sleep cycles?
Talking about
The melatonin was made by the pineal gland, so that's part of it. There was another part of the brain that was important for the epithalamus is where that pineal gland is. But then there was another part, not the thalamus, but the hypothalamus. Okay, so the pineal gland and hypothalamus are important in regulating these sleep patterns. Okay, so they're going to release chemicals that will put you into more of a deep sleep and more of a lighter sleep. Okay, and then the areas of your brain that are being used depend on what you're dreaming about. If you are having more of a run-around dream, your motor areas are going to light up. If you have more of a sitting and thinking dream, your frontal lobe of your brain is going to be lit up. So it depends on what you're thinking about, what you're dreaming about, so which areas of your brain are used during the sleep process itself. Okay? Although RAS activity declines in sleep, sleep is more than turning off RAS. Okay, so that statement requires us to remember what RAS is. What is RAS? Does anybody know what it stands for? Reticular activating system. Okay, and what's the function of RAS? Normally.
Doesn't it sort stuff out?
Sorts out what you don't need, and then it also sends signals to do what? What does it do to your cortex? Just every now and then, you just keep sending signals to keep you alert. Okay, so RAS keeps you alert and awake. So to go to sleep, you are going to turn off RAS, mostly. Okay? But the brain is going to be actively guided into sleep with some of those other chemicals. Melatonin, specifically, from your pineal gland, is going to help lead you into sleep. Okay? So the importance of sleep. Why do we sleep and why do we dream? Okay, so they are still working on this question, trying to figure it out. Dreaming, they originally thought they were just things that we made up when we woke up. Like your brain was hyperactive when you woke up from a deep sleep, and it just made up all these ideas. And so now we're able to watch people while they sleep with those EEGs to see what their brains are doing, and we see that people are actually dreaming when they're asleep, which is a good thing. But we're also seeing some brain activity during non-dream time. So that non-rapid eye movement time. Okay? So that slow wave sleep, the non-rapid eye movement sleep, is presumed to be a restorative stage. Okay? It gives your brain a time to relax, a time to rest, and be prepared for new things the next day. Slow wave sleep is also thought to be helpful in memory, to solidify a long-term memory. So they see these little bursts of activity during non-rapid eye movement sleep, and they say that during those times, the information is being transferred from your short-term memory into your long-term memory. Okay, so super important time. REM sleep also may be the reverse, so it's your dream sleep, maybe the reverse learning process where extra information is gotten rid of. You get rid of it from your brain, and you only save the important things. It could also be a time where you work out situations, maybe there's a conflict, and you dream about it to come up with different solutions. And then also daily sleep requirements are going to decrease with age. So I've got here, that's going to come up on the slide, the recommendations of hours for sleep for each age group. Any guesses how many hours of sleep y'all are supposed to get?
8 to 9.
You guys, most of you probably fit into this young adult category, 18 to 25. 7 to 9 hours is recommended. May be appropriate. So you may be able to survive with anywhere between 6 and 11. Not recommended. less than 6 hours, or more than 11, which is, I don't think any of y'all fall into that category. More of y'all probably fall into the less than 6, right? But you see that younger children are supposed to sleep more. As you get older, you sleep less, okay? But sleep is super important. It helps your brain recharge, helps you solidify your memories, work out problems. It's all good. They've actually shown that your oxygen use in the brain is higher during REM sleep than it is when you're awake. So your brain is doing a whole lot of stuff while you're asleep, which is crazy. All right, sleep disorders. Narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is when you go to sleep when you're not supposed to. Okay, it usually lasts about 15 minutes and then you'll wake back up. And it's usually triggered by something exciting. Okay, so you get excited and then you go to sleep. And that has to do with the chemicals that are causing sleep. They are released when they're not supposed to. Okay, insomnia is the opposite of that. You stay awake when you shouldn't be awake. Okay, so chronic inability to obtain the amount or quality of sleep needed. Again, it's a chemical issue. Your brain is producing too much of the arousal hormones, or or they're not being broken down like they're supposed to. Yeah.
Habits or something like that cause insomnia.
Yes. So insomnia can be a physical thing where you have this that's passed down from one generation to the next. But a lot of the decisions you make and how you choose to go to bed and what time and what you do in your bed, like is your bed only for sleeping, or is your bed also the place where you study and you play games and you just lounge around?
Yeah.
That can cause insomnia. You've got to have your room that is for sleeping, that is quiet, and that is a restful and peaceful
I
area.
wanted to make sure I was thinking that right, because I've heard that, but I'm like, is that really true? Is
Yeah.
that or not?
It sure is. Which is hard to do when you're living in a dorm because your bedroom is everything. Exactly. Okay, and then sleep apnea is where you stop breathing while you're asleep. So what do you do to treat sleep apnea?
Wear that.
Yeah, wear your mask, the CPAP machine, which forces air into your body while you're asleep so that you actually get oxygen. For insomnia, you give them either melatonin, which is a natural go back to sleep medicine, or you block the activity of those activating hormones. All right. Goodness, guys, we gotta catch up. Okay, stages of memory. Putting things into your brain. The 2 stages of memory are short-term memory and long-term memory. Okay? Short-term memory or your working memory is a fleeting memory of the events that continually happen. Okay, so you're constantly using short-term memory as you're taking things in and out of your brain. It lasts anywhere from seconds to hours, and it's limited to 7 to 8 pieces of information. So, for example, short-term memory is you go look up a phone number, you plug in that phone number, you call it. And then that phone number is gone because you don't ever have to use it again. Okay? Long-term memory has a limitless capacity, and it's going to be something that's stored over a longer period of time. Okay? So you're going to get information that's going to come into your brain, stay in temporary storage, your short-term memory, not put into short-term memory yet, but it goes to temporary storage in the cerebral cortex. You will decide, do I need to keep that information or do I need to get rid of it? Okay? You may get rid of it and the data is lost permanently. You don't ever remember that. Or it can be sent to short-term memory. After short-term memory, it can either be sent to long-term memory and be kept for a long time or forgotten and lost. Things in long-term memory aren't necessarily always going to stay there. You can also lose things out of short-term memory or out of long-term memory. Okay? Yeah.
Is it true, like, I've heard on social media and whatnot, that, like, if you're out of school or, let's say, during summer break,
Mm-hmm.
is it true you can lose 3 months of, like, knowledge? And
So I don't know the exact time, like whether it's 3 months or not, but you do lose a lot of your information over the summer. So that's one of the arguments for year-round school. So so that you don't lose that over the summer and then you don't have to catch up when you come back. Okay, so how do we get that information to transfer from short-term memory to long-term memory? Okay, this is super important for you guys because you need to transfer all this information that we've talked about today from short-term memory into long-term memory so that you will have it next Wednesday, right? So here's some things that you can do. Factors that affect it. Your emotional state. Guys, you learn best when you're excited. Y'all look like you're super excited today. So learning is going to be happening, right? Yeah. Okay. So you learn best when you're alert, motivated, aroused. When you have to figure out a problem on your own, that helps you learn better. Rehearsal, repeating and rehearsing material enhances memory. So going back and reading over your notes multiple times, listening to everything multiple times. Okay, that's going to help you out. That'll transfer from short-term to long-term. Associating information that you're learning with old information. Okay, this could be associating back and say, well, I heard this once before. Or coming up with a way to relate new stuff to things you see every day in life. So saying the myelin sheath is like a Swiss cake roll. That is association. Okay? But there are some things that you don't have to think about to send to long-term memory. Some things are automatic memory. Some things just automatically get placed in long-term memory, and you didn't put it there. So it's subconscious information that's stored. So I don't know any of you guys, but any of you remember what outfit you were wearing the first day of kindergarten? Okay, some of y'all do. So it's not something that you intentionally put into memory. It's not something you intentionally tried to put into long-term memory, but it was associated with that situation, and so it is put there on its
I
own.
remember my school picture outfit in kindergarten.
Yeah, but you look at that a lot. It's not memory. All right, guys, I have 1 minute. Okay. 2 categories of memory are fact memory and skill memory. Fact memory or declarative memory is learning explicit information, facts, ideas, things like that. It's related to our conscious thoughts and language ability. The better your language ability, the better you are at remembering facts, or remembering discrete information. And it's stored with the context text in which it was learned. So you may remember what room you were sitting in when you learned it. You may remember what the professor was wearing when you learned it. You may remember what you were wearing when you learned it. Okay, so that is stored with that fact memory. Whereas skill memory is less conscious and it involves motor activity, like learning how to ride a bike. Okay, acquired through practice, and it doesn't come with those associations. Do not retain the context in which they were learned. All right, guys, we gotta pick things up next time. I will not get distracted. We'll do good. I'm going to skip this slide and keep going. Okay? So we have covered so far the neuron basic anatomy. How does a neuron work? How does an action potential get created? Then we said that the nervous system is separated into 2 divisions, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system was the brain and spinal cord. That was covered in chapter 12. And now we're moving on to chapter 13, which is the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so this half of the chart is where we're going. We've looked at this chart before. We know that there's sensory information being taken in, and we know that there's motor information going out. Okay? All right, so let's talk first about the sensory half of the peripheral nervous system. So getting information into the central nervous system. Okay, so we need something to pick up the stimulus. Something to pick up and say, what's going on around me? Those things that pick up sensors are called, or that pick up a stimulus is called a receptor. And there's many different types of receptors. We're going to talk about a couple of them today, but we'll talk about more when we get to your special senses after this test. We'll start on them on Friday. All receptors are considered transducers. Okay, and transducers are going to change one form of energy into another. Okay, the purpose is to generate a nerve impulse. Okay, what form of energy is a nerve impulse? Electrical, right? What is causing that electrical charge? What's being separated by the plasma membrane? Sodium coming in, potassium going out, right? Well, yes, sodium coming in, potassium going out. And so we've separated those ions, those charges. That's what we're getting to. We want to create an action potential. We want to create that nerve impulse. But these receptors are able to change a stimulus, which could be temperature, into an action potential. They can change pressure into an action potential. They can change photo information, so light, into an action potential. So these guys are really, really cool. Okay? They can change other things into action potentials. Okay? So the effect of a stimulus, which could be light, could be pressure, could be heat, could be cold, is to produce a receptor potential or a voltage change in that plasma membrane. And once we get a voltage change in the plasma membrane, we get an action potential, and then we can activate other neurons. Okay? So let's look at the information that these sensory receptors are going to send to the central nervous system. So we're sending them to the spinal cord or the brain. We can deliver these 4 pieces of information. The first thing we can send is the modality. What is it that has activated this receptor? Okay, so the type of stimulus or sensation it produces. So a modality could be light. A modality could be pressure, could be pain, could be, what haven't I covered yet? Temperature, have I done that one? Anyway, we're going to get to all those on the next slide. Okay, but that's modality. What are the different things that are stimulating that receptor? The second piece of information that the receptor can send is the location. So a receptor in your fingertip, when it fires, it's going to say that that information came from the fingertip. Okay? So if you got a pain receptor in your fingertip, once it's activated, it says to the brain, there is pain in my finger, not pain in my foot. The third piece of information it transmits is the intensity. How painful is it? Have I just gotten a little paper cut, which I know sometimes feels like you've chopped your arm off, but it isn't the exact same thing as chopping your arm off, right? There is a difference in intensity. You aren't sending the same information when you just have a paper cut versus having your finger cut off. Okay? So intensity can be sent in a couple different ways. It can be encoded by the firing frequencies of the nerve fibers. Okay? So think of it this way. If you get your arm cut off, maybe that receptor or the receptor is firing super fast. Whereas if you just got a little paper cut, maybe he just says, I'm hurting a little bit over here, and it fires a lot slower. Okay, so we can send it by intensity or by the frequency. Recruitment of more fibers. So we are getting more nerve fibers activated and excited so that we have more of those nerves sending information back to the brain. Okay? So a paper cut may be one neuron firing. Cutting your arm off may be hundreds of neurons firing. Okay? And lastly, stimulation of fibers that vary in their thresholds. So do you guys remember talking about that threshold that is in the axon hillock that we're trying to get to that voltage? Once we reach that voltage, then an action potential will happen. So these different receptors, some of them are going to have different thresholds. And so this receptor over here won't send information unless we get a big change in voltage. This receptor over here, he'll fire even if we have just a small change in voltage. So we have these guys firing for a paper cut, but if we get our finger cut off, these guys over here are going to start firing too. Okay? So that's going to send different intensities to the brain and spinal cord to let you know what exactly is happening. Because you don't want it to feel like your finger's being cut off every time you get a paper cut, right? Yes. Okay. And then finally, number 4, the last piece of information that is sent is the duration. Okay? Your finger that has been cut with a piece of paper doesn't hurt forever. It only hurts for a short period of time because those nerves are only firing for a short period of time. Okay? They're not firing for forever. All right, so those are our 4 pieces of information that these receptors can send back to the brain or spinal cord. Okay, any questions so far? Yes.
It's like, let's say you get surgery on something.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, will it be a different? It's like once, like let's say you break your arm, when you first break it, you go through all this, but then you have like a different kind of pattern.
Yeah, so it has to do with different neurons that are firing for different types of pain, because there's sharp pain receptors and then there's dull pain receptors that we're going to get to in a second. But then you talked about breaking an arm, but when you talk about things like amputations, you lose the limb forever, but you can have phantom limb pains where it's still sending signals saying that there's an arm there and that it's hurting, even though nothing is there to send the signal. And that has to do more with the central nervous system and what he's doing than the receptors themselves. Okay?
So when you're in anesthesia, do you not get those signals?
So, it depends on what type of anesthesia you're in. If you're in just asleep, then you have your body's normal paralysis centers that are saying, hey, don't move because you're asleep and we don't want you to run around while you're asleep. And so those will be kicking in and you won't be able to move, and you're also not feeling as much of the pain. If you have other things like an epidural that is blocking your spinal cord, then your brain and spinal cord never know that you have the pain going on. There have been studies, I was reading about it before class, about your phantom arm syndrome stuff, that if you do a surgery and amputation with a spinal block, then you're less likely to have that phantom arm syndrome because your brain and spinal cord never know that there was pain there to begin with. But if you do it with just general anesthesia or putting them to sleep to where they can't feel it, I guess that would be general. Anyway. But with that, your brain and spinal cord experience the pain the first time, and it's severe pain that it remembers it and keeps going. And so there you have your phantom arm syndrome. All right. So there's different levels where we can block pain. We can block pain at the receptor level. We can block pain at the spinal cord level. We can block pain at the neurotransmitter level, so those nerves aren't sending signals like they should. All right. Receptors. What type of receptors do we have? So we want to be able to pick up all kinds of information in your body and outside of your body. So we have receptors that pick up all kinds of different things. Okay, so first we have chemoreceptors. They're going to pick up different chemicals. Okay, so in your body, you're going to have receptors that can respond to pH changes. That is a chemoreceptor. You're going to have receptors that can respond to osmotic pressure changes. Okay, so salt levels, that's going to be a chemoreceptor. And then when we talk about special senses, which is your hearing, your smell, your taste, all that, your smelling, that's a chemoreceptor. Chemicals are bonding to receptors in your nose. And taste is also done with a chemoreceptor. Because you're eating chemicals, and those chemicals bind to your tongue and then activate certain receptors. Okay, so we can pick up chemicals. We also have thermoreceptors. What are they going to respond to? Temperature. That one's a pretty easy one. It's in the name, right? So that's going to be able to respond to hot and cold. You've got those all over your body. Number 3, nociceptors. That one is the one that the name doesn't really sound like what it does. Okay, so the nociceptors are your pain receptors. And they're going to sense tissue damage, increased pressure, things like that. Number 4, mechanoreceptors. They're responding to mechanical change. So a pressure sensor on your hands, in your skin, is a mechanoreceptor. Do you remember looking at the skin cross-section and the hair and your free nerve endings down at the bulb of the hair? When that hair moved, those free nerve endings picked up the movement of the hair. So they are mechanoreceptors. They're responding to the movement of the hair itself. You've got mechanoreceptors in your muscles that are noting where those muscles are located, how far are they stretched, things like that. Mechanoreceptors also help you hear. We'll get to that later. And then number 5, photoreceptors help you respond to light. Those are going to be found where in your body? In your eyes. Okay? So there's lots of photoreceptors in your eyeballs. Alright. So we've got different types of receptors based off of what they respond to. We've gotten what information they send. And we can separate our senses into general senses and special senses. And I've kind of been throwing around these words already, but let's define them and say what they are. So general senses are also called somatic. Remember, soma of a neuron means body, and so soma just means body. So somatic is senses of all over your body. Somatosensory is another term for it. Somesthetic is another term for it. But you have receptors that are widely distributed throughout your body. They are going to detect things like touch, pressure, heat, cold, pain, chemistry, just general senses that are happening all over your body. Then your special senses. The special senses are all located around your head. So it's hearing, your vision, taste, equilibrium, and smell. And those are ones that we have nice, well-developed organs that are going to pick up the information. So we are going to spend a lot of time talking about each of those senses, but for your next test. Okay, not right now. We're going to focus on these general senses today. And of the general senses, we're going to spend the most time talking about the nociceptors, the pain receptors. They are found everywhere in your body except where? We talked about this the other day, and I wasn't sure of the answer. Well, what is it? Your brain tissue. Okay? So, it is not found in the brain tissue itself, but there are plenty of nociceptors in your meninges that are surrounding your brain, and in those blood vessels that are surrounding your brain. So they're there in that region, but they're not in the actual brain tissue. Okay? You have lots of nociceptors in your skin and mucous membranes. Why do you think that would be important? Yes, okay. So she just said if you touch something that's burning, you know to move, right? We need to be highly aware of our surroundings to know if there's something there that's going to hurt you, right? So you can run away and hide. So, I don't know. Some of you guys might do the fight or flight response and actually do the fight part of the fight or flight response. I usually go to the flight side of that. All right. So we have nociceptors everywhere. There are 2 main types of nociceptors. This relates to sharp pain versus dull, nagging pain. Okay, so sharp pain is going to happen, you get your stabbing feeling, it's right after an injury, very, very quick. And so these are carried on myelinated fibers. Why do you want fast pain carried on myelinated fibers instead of unmyelinated fibers? Myelin makes it move faster. Why? Okay, so you can respond faster, yes. Okay, so myelinated makes it go faster so you can respond faster to that initial injury, right? What about myelination makes the action potential travel faster? It jumps from node of Ranvier to node of Ranvier. Okay, it jumps down the axon. Okay, so it happens fast, sharp feeling. You know that you're injured and you need to do something about it. But then The dull, just nagging pain that comes afterwards. Slow pain is carried on unmyelinated fibers. So it doesn't happen as fast. It can remain around a lot longer, and it gives you that dull ache. Okay? So there's two different types of fibers used by these two different types of nociceptors. That's why you're getting two different types of responses.